Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Vjal podcast. I'm here with Adi Burlia, founder of the Vjal Institute. This week's a little different. I'm Mark Troy, your host, and we have breaking news, just a couple of hours old. For those of you who follow the AI industry, big news because 3 or 4 days ago, Anthropic dropped their biggest model yet, and then suddenly something happened just a couple of hours ago. Adi's going to tell us about it. Adi, what's going on?
Mark, they had Fable 5. Now, great name. They had the Mythos platform, and they've been saying it for months. Oh my God, this is going to change the world. It's so scary. Bad things will happen. It's so scary. We can't give it to you. And so here we're going to give you now Fable 5, which is based on this, and it came out 12 hours ago. Now, I'll be very honest, it's a great model. I pretty much bought another two $200 Claude plans. I was burning through them because very interestingly, they said, hey, and they have an IPO coming up, that we're going to give you until June 22nd, which you can use it in your plans. And then you're going to have to pay per token, which is really, really expensive. So all of us like, okay, load up. We have 10 days of using this model for really cheap, and let's burn through the tokens. And I probably burned through a couple of billion, right? There. And then the government just starts off looking at this model, and we get this announcement. And you have Anthropic, of course, and this is a statement they've now taken out, where they basically said that they're putting export controls and licenses on Fable 5, that it's too dangerous to put in the hands of everyone else. And so so Secretary Bassnett sends him a letter saying that, hey, we are going to say that only US citizens can use this model, nobody else. Now, obviously, there's a lot of history that the US government has had with Anthropic, but unfortunately, it doesn't help that Dario came out with this very interesting thing that says the government should have the power to block or deter deployment of a model if it's determined in light of third-party assessment to
Like a
present.
week or two ago, right? They wrote this recently.
Yeah, yeah. So, Dario brings this out, and they've been for the last 2 months saying, "Oh my God, this is so scary. It's like the world is ending. We'll only give it to people if we are, super vetted and all of that." And so it comes as no surprise. They said, "Well, you said it was a bomb. You told us, hey, you shouldn't let people have bombs, and so you told us to come and regulate you, and that's what we did." Now, of course, I find this, although there's a huge amount of short and short happening in the industry, saying, "Hey guys, you should never do this," and I was really surprised. By the way, I love the FAA. I think they do a great job. We should model AI regulation on the agencies like the FAA, which should be required to go through technical testing and auditing, and their release should be blocked or revoked as a threat to public safety if they do not meet high standards of safety. It takes a decade to get a plane off the ground because of all the regulatory checks and checks and all. So I found it was a very poor comparison. And pretty much they did exactly what the government asked. And they said, look, there. And from what I hear, Wall Street Journal has a bit of saying that it might have been Amazon who reported that here are some concerns that we have. Here are some examples, although Anthropics have been hand waving them. Hey, everybody can do that, which also means that under the same label, maybe ChatGPT 5.6 might fall under the same purview. Now, this is what's happened. Obviously, now let's see the huge, huge reactions to this and why this is so important for you and for the entire AI ecosystem. First, very clear now, this is a shot off the bow for sovereign AI. We've been talking about it for about a couple of years. At the Institute, we really support it because we believe every country needs to have an AI that it can trust, match its culture, match its values. But now you have an example of a frontier model, game-changing model, denied to the rest of the world because the US thought it was too scary, or this is something that is a national security risk. By the way, we've seen this fight before when PGP, the encryption systems came out more than 2.5 decades ago, and at that time they got around it by publishing books with the full source code, and those were allowed by law. So they kind of basically did an end run. But that said, US continuously does have export controls on software, including many encryption standards. And I think this is what's going to be sort of used, tried and tested, court approved to look at these models as well. But one good news for everybody else, companies like Cohere up in Canada, who are great guys, as you know, as well as a whole bunch of other companies pushing towards sovereign AI, saying that look, uh, uh, at some point, the best of the best models might be classified under national security, and you're going to lose access. So you need to have, your own R&D, your own research, your own access to models. Second, for companies, I got rug pulled a little bit because I was in the middle of a build when the news
Yeah.
came out, and poof, like I would not have started this build. It was extraordinarily complicated. I would not have bothered. It stopped writing my files in between. It didn't even finish. And it was so jarring to me. I was like, wait, this is not good. And the sad part is that I think a lot of people have experienced that, and they're saying this is a real risk. Now, we've been saying it for a couple of years that you should always, as a business, have at least one backup model that you know works. Going all in on any one company is highly risky. We saw that with OpenAI nearly collapsing a couple of years ago. We've seen this with other models, which have sort of changed some backend activity, and then your workflow stop working. So, one, please de-risk, at least have two models that are running your crucial workflows. Don't go all in. That was true 2 years ago. That is true now. And I think Fable 5 is a great sort of demonstration of why that is true. But on a more practical note, Mark, this is what drives me crazy. The part of this problem is that the number of scientists who worked on these models. And so, you're going to have a huge number of researchers across the board for working on these frontier models who would be denied access to their own models and to their own technology. Now, the US edge 2 years, 3 years ago was, hey, it takes massive compute to train these models. Very few companies can invest in that kind of compute. Therefore, US wins. China has a chip shortage problem engineered by the US because of this risk. China tries to catch up by just putting 10x the number of old chips there, and that was a deal. In the last 6 months, 1 year, that has moved. This has, and courtesy DeepSeek, courtesy a lot of different leaps in optimization, this has moved from a capital to a talent, and not just like, hey, we have smart people. There are like 100 or 200 people in the world who kind of know what they're doing, who could build these models. How many of them are U.S. citizens? And I think that's what's going to really pinch is you have the talent, some of these guys being paid 100 million, $200 million a year, don't qualify to work on their own tech, which they've invented. They say, you know what, this is fine. Let the IPO happen. I'm going to take my money, and then I'm going to go to Switzerland. I'm going to go to Singapore. I'm going to come to Dubai, and I am going to use my knowledge to rebuild what I made in the US in these other countries, and they'd be very warmly welcome. So I don't see it sticking, but it's not sustainable. Yes, Anthropic kind of set itself up for it, but for the industry at large, this is a bit of a shock moment.
Yeah, and Dario Modia has been kind of crying the sky is falling for a couple of years. He's been proven wrong on a couple of occasions. Eventually, he may be right. But on the other hand, I've heard stories that the people that have been using the Mythos version, the more advanced version, I think they said they found 10,500 critical vulnerabilities in our software systems, basically things that would allow hackers to penetrate, the highest security software. So maybe it's not all hype. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have concrete examples, multiple research papers in the last two months, showing that, hey, having a very advanced model. And I want to be clear here, right? There are two parts of this. There is one part which is that, hey, it's just if you point any state-of-the-art model at any software, there's stuff that went wrong, right? These are, at scale, you run them 24 hours again and again and again, they're going to find bugs, right?
Okay.
And so a lot of the early bugs that Mythos found were easily replicated and found just by pointing like normal, ChatGPT 5.2, 5.3, forget about 5.5, or even DeepSeek or something at it and said, hey, find bugs. Oh, well, look, here's the bug, right? So it's just a one-time cleanup of legacy stuff that, most people don't, we don't have an army of engineers going through every line of code on the vast majority of software that turns out runs the world. and getting AI agents to do that will come up with lots of code. That said, Mythos was, and Cloudflare had a brilliant paper on this, was unique in its ability to grab multiple, so one or two bugs did not create problems, but its ability to grab them, string them together, and create custom exploits was truly exceptional and scary. So, I mean, they do have a point, but I think jumping up and down and yelling it from the mountains and asking government to intervene, perhaps not the best way to think about it. Open source is 4 months behind. Presumably, it'll catch up, and then we'll see what happens next, and how Claude and everyone else is going to try to react.
Well, here's what you get if you go to Claude today, Claude.ai. You log in. I did like you. I woke up this morning, was going to do some work, and now we see Claude Fable 5 currently unavailable. I guess Anthropic said we have no way of figuring out who's a US national and who's not, so we're just going to cut off access for everybody. And my guess is they're going to wait a few days until the weekend's over to see what they can do to get it back online.
So, so they have a trusted program. Apple has a trusted developer program, all a trusted program. The banking KYC, there's about a dozen companies who are super good at getting KYC. Now, you can go to OpenAI and become a trusted person by going, giving your passport details, copying, and they have very extensive checks, the same ones that are powering the financial system to check if you are a US citizen or not. So if they
Yeah.
wanted, they could be back up within a day and saying, hey, if you want to start using this, show us a US passport, and you
Mhm.
can sort of start using it. That said, one that would just collapse the industry. Again, like I said, a large number of researchers, employees in the top companies who are really using it, aren't US citizens, even if they are in the US and they're pushing things forward. So that US citizen tag has to be very carefully aligned, permanent resident, green card holders, all of that part sort of comes in. And the second is, of course, you're going to have a huge black market of people sort of setting up these accounts and giving it to their buddy or into the friend on there. And what remains unanswered is the APIs. If you have a US company which is registered and properly done by the US, but their internal employees like, hey, we can't give you access to this tool. Because at back end it uses Fable 5, which is a restricted bit of software, and therefore, yeah, if you're a US citizen, you can use our internal HR super system, which runs on Fable 5. But if you're not, you can't. And what that means from there, again, it's the playbook's been done before. But I would be very sad to see if the government didn't, take a step back and find a better solution. The good news is the administration right now has access to very sophisticated people. We had Mr. Srinivasan, who was there earlier as the AI czar. They can pick up the phone and talk to them and get some very good advice on how this is going to play out. Because there is the philosophical part. Yes, we should stop it, but then also being realistic. Does this
Yeah.
put America behind China by 6 months? What
Yeah.
is the procedure of allowing Claude to come back? Who is the third party agency or lab that is going to do the safety evaluation? How long is that going to take? If, all our experience with anything that's government, it's not going to happen in a week or a day or a month. And so if,
Yeah.
Apple is still not launching their AI in Europe for this very reason, right? They can't find a way to sort of match the regulation in time. And so there's a lot of things that are fairly consequential because of what the decision the government will take on how to approach it. I'm just kind of glad though, Mark, that this happened a little bit early on in the game. I think had this happened, after a big blow up happened,
Sure.
where somebody hacked the stock market and collapsed a bunch of stocks using Fable or using one of the open source systems as well. We know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's harder for the government then to come up with a more nuanced answer than when, hey, it just blew up the stock market. We're not going to listen to you about China right now. We need to stop these things. So it's nice it's still in a time of peace rather, when something terrible has happened.
Good point. Well, look, our plan today for our podcast is going to be you were going to show us how to use Fable 5. I guess we'll save that for next week.
So pause on that, and hopefully we'll come back on Monday with that demo.
Right. Well, look, thanks everybody for joining us. As always, you can check out all of our offerings at vjal.ai or send us an email at outreach@vjal.ai. Thanks, Adi, for joining us, and we'll keep you guys updated with the news.
Thanks, everyone, and stay safe out there. Apparently, there are nuclear bomb models that are that you might have access to. So yeah, hopefully we'll be back on Monday with that demo.
Cheers, everybody. Bye bye.